For centuries, people have been told that a great cataclysmic war will mark the end of humanity, an ultimate battle between religious groups, a so-called Armageddon. But what if I told you that this entire idea is a massive lie, a fabricated myth born from medieval political propaganda? The term Armageddon comes from a single mention in the book of Revelation, specifically Revelation 16:16. It describes a great battle between the forces of good and evil. But let's be clear, this war has nothing to do with a clash between religions. The author of Revelation, John of Patmos, wrote the text under Roman persecution. Many scholars believe his writings were symbolic, referring to the struggle against the oppressive Roman Empire, not a prophecy of a literal world war. In fact, if we look at Jewish, Christian, and Islamic scriptures, we find no evidence of an end-times war between their followers. Instead, we find overwhelming messages of peace and human dignity. Let's set the record straight with actual religious teachings. Judaism, whoever saves one life, it is as if they have saved the whole world. Talmud Sanhedrin 37a. Christianity, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Matthew 5:9. Islam, whoever kills a soul, it is as if he had slain all of mankind, and whoever saves one, it is as if he had saved all of mankind. Quran 5:32. These texts don't preach war. They promote peace, justice, and the value of human life. So how did the idea of a religious war take hold? During the Middle Ages, apocalyptic narratives were weaponized by political and religious leaders. Take the Crusades, for example. Christian rulers convinced thousands that they were fighting a holy war against Islam, even though Jesus himself preached peace. In Spain, the Catholic monarchy used religious propaganda to justify the violent expulsion of Muslims and Jews, and in Europe, rulers stoked fear of an impending end-times battle to rally support for their wars. The concept of Armageddon as a war between religious groups wasn't a divine prophecy, it was political manipulation. Unfortunately, these medieval tactics didn't stay in the past. Some politicians still use misinterpreted religious texts to justify war and division. In recent history, world leaders have referenced end-times prophecies to push for aggressive military actions. Extremist groups, both religious and secular, have invoked apocalyptic rhetoric to radicalize followers. Even in everyday media, we see fear-based narratives about a looming clash of civilizations. But here's the problem. They're all using manipulated history to fuel their agendas, and that's dangerous. The world cannot afford to be held hostage by extremists and ignorance. If we allow these false narratives to dominate, we risk more unnecessary wars, more division, and more suffering. Armageddon is not a war between faiths. It's a war between those who seek power through division and those who believe in the value of every human life. Choose truth, choose peace. History has shown us that when politicians use religious fear-mongering, it's rarely about faith, it's about power. And today we see the same dangerous tactics being used. Warmongers and extremist groups alike invoke the final war to justify military aggression, convince people that war is inevitable, and silence those who advocate for peace. Think about it. How many times have you heard politicians say, "God is on our side," when launching a war? How often do extremist groups claim they are fighting a divine battle? This isn't divine prophecy, it's medieval propaganda being repackaged for modern warfare. Here's the reality. When leaders weaponize religious myths, it leads to real destruction. It fuels wars that kill thousands, tear apart families, and displace entire populations. When the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, some American leaders framed the war as a religious struggle. President George W. Bush even called it a crusade, a term with deep historical ties to medieval Christian wars against Muslims. Although the war was about geopolitics and oil, Apocalyptic rhetoric was used to rally support, making it sound like a battle of good versus evil rather than a military invasion. The result: hundreds of thousands of deaths and a destabilized Middle East that still suffers today. Israeli extremists exploit religious narratives to justify violence. Some Israeli extremists claim they are fulfilling biblical prophecy by expanding territory. The reality: politicians and extremists fuel war using religious justifications, ignoring the fact that both Judaism and Islam preach peace, justice, and coexistence. In the United States, some Christian Zionist groups push for war in the Middle East because they believe it will trigger the second coming of Christ. These groups influence U.S. foreign policy, supporting conflict rather than peace efforts. Not for political strategy, but because they believe it will fulfill a biblical prophecy. This is one of the most dangerous misuses of religion, as it encourages violence instead of diplomacy. This cycle of fear-based justification for violence is one of the biggest threats to global peace. It's no longer about religion, it's about power, manipulation, and control, and it's not just politicians. Media outlets and social media platforms amplify these dangerous myths. If we don't challenge this false narrative, it will continue to justify war, suffering, and division. The world has already lost millions to wars fueled by religious and political propaganda. How many more must die before we break this cycle? The truth is, the real battle is not between religions, it's between truth and manipulation. The educated Christian, Muslim, or Jew does not want war. The educated believer is not waiting for an end-times battle. But as long as powerful figures push these dangerous myths, humanity will remain hostage to fear. That's why raising awareness is critical. The more people understand history, religious texts, and political manipulation, the harder it becomes for fearmongers to control them. The truth is that people of different faiths have coexisted peacefully for centuries. For example, for over 700 years, Muslims, Jews, and Christians lived together in Al-Andalus under Muslim rule. During this time, Muslims ruled with religious tolerance, allowing Jews and Christians to practice their faith freely. Christian and Jewish scholars worked with Muslims in translating Greek and Roman texts, preserving Western philosophy. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad and libraries in Cordoba were centers of scientific, medical, and philosophical advancements, where scholars from all three faiths collaborated. This community played a crucial role in influencing European Renaissance thought. The Great Mosque of Cordoba was built as a Muslim mosque, but later coexisted as a shared space with Christians. Another example is the Ottoman Empire, which ruled over Muslims, Christians, and Jews for centuries. Yet there were no religious wars between them inside the empire. Instead, they introduced the millet system, where different religious groups had the autonomy to govern their own communities. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim legal courts operated separately. Jews, Christians, and Muslims held high-ranking government positions. Suleiman the Magnificent protected Jews expelled from Spain, allowing them to settle in the empire and flourish. Sultan Bayezid II sent ships to rescue Jews from the Spanish Inquisition in 1492, saying, "Those who say Spain is wise for expelling its Jews are wrong, for I have enriched my kingdom by welcoming them." A third example is the Golden Age of Islam. The Abbasid Caliphate sponsored the House of Wisdom, or Beit al-Hikmah, in Baghdad, where Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked together to translate, study, and expand knowledge in medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. The Muslim Caliph al-Ma'mun invited scholars from different faiths to work on scientific advancements. Christian and Jewish doctors like Hunayn ibn Ishaq were some of the most famous physicians of the time. The House of Wisdom was responsible for preserving Greek philosophy, which later influenced the European Renaissance. These examples show that cooperation is not just possible, it's the natural state of humanity when fear isn't weaponized against us. History shows that Jews, Christians, and Muslims are not destined to fight. Instead, these religions coexisted peacefully for centuries, creating some of the most advanced civilizations in history. The real enemy has always been political manipulation, not religion itself. So why are modern politicians still pushing the myth that religious wars are inevitable? Because fear, division, and conflict give them power. But we can stop falling for their tricks. By learning history, we can break free from fear-based propaganda and work toward peace. We have a choice: stay silent and allow history to repeat itself, or break the cycle by spreading the truth. We must refuse to let false prophecies and political manipulation define our future.